What's going on in Washington? What's going on in Albany? Unresolved issues in both capitals. The Point starts right now. Congressman Josh Gottheimer is co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, but one of the things the bipartisan group has been unable to solve is funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which continues to cause airport delays here in the metropolitan area. Now, we know that there's been a tentative sort of agreement. I say tentative sort of because who knows, and as you know that better than anybody, but it seems like the head of the Senate and the head of the Republicans in the House have decided that there's a tentative agreement that would fund DHS without funding ICE. Is there any hope?
Correct. The deal that actually passed out of the Senate unanimously, and then the House said no thank you, the leadership in the House.
Is there any hope that that no thank you will turn into a thank you?
Yes, it seems like that no thank you will be a thank you, and we've got to get the Department of Homeland Security open fully. It's absurd that it hasn't been, and I think this is a good outcome. You know, I'd still like to see certain reforms of ICE, which I had been working in a bipartisan way on for months to try to get some of the things done that are necessary, judicial warrants before going into a home, IDs, IDs on... Yes, and one of the big things was making sure that officers identify themselves and that they have a badge, and then we have more coordination actually with local law enforcement, with ICE. A lot of these reforms, by the way, which the Secretary of Homeland Security has said that he's open to many of the reforms, the new secretary, and I think you're going to see a lot of change in that department and the way things are operating.
But here's the question. If you come up with a deal in the next couple of weeks to fund most of DHS except for ICE, what happens? Do we just let the ICE funding go away so it doesn't become an election issue next November? Or do we find a solution sometime so that some reforms of some kind allow ICE to function?
So I would like to find reforms. That's what many of us have been working on in a bipartisan way, as you mentioned. What looks like will happen right now is that they'll fund Homeland Security, so without ICE, and then the Republicans are planning on putting up a separate bill just to fund ICE. They'll do it through a method called reconciliation, which you may have heard of before, and that ends up often being a partisan vote. So that's their plan. I'd like to see, and I'm worried that reforms won't happen if that's the way they go. So I'm going to keep working with a group of us in the House and the Senate, bipartisan, to try to figure out some of those reforms and to fund Homeland. We've got to make sure our Homeland is protected fully and that our airports are running well, and that, of course, these TSA officers and everybody at Homeland gets paid.
But here's my question. Given the fact that the margins in both the House and Senate are small, and there are Republicans who have voiced opposition to various of the reforms you talk about in terms of ICE, what's the possibility that they won't go along with any reforms?
Well, see, you definitely have a bunch of people who don't want any reforms, but there's enough people, and when you have small margins, as you know, that matters.
So are there Democrats that are going to go along with the bill to give the Republicans enough votes?
If they put reforms in that bill with other things, I definitely think you can get Democrats and Republicans on board with that.
But you're not going to get all the reforms you're asking for.
No, of course not. It's called working.
So, in other words, what can you give in on? I guess you don't want to talk about that to negotiate.
I don't negotiate in public, but let me just tell you, there are many reforms that the ones we've been talking, Democrats,
like
Republicans,
masks and identifying yourself.
Masks are harder, although it may be used because if someone's going in, you know, their argument is their officers are getting doxxed and people find them and then they go after them. However, what I think is reasonable is if they they should have to use masks only if they need to, right? Not for every instance. Or you also have badges and IDs. You actually have coordination with local law enforcement, which is really important. You're able to investigate when something happens. You know, we saw all the tragedies in Minnesota, and there was fighting back against actually having external FBI investigations and working with the state. That's unacceptable. They shouldn't be able to go into hospitals and polling places and pick people up, you know, which I think is outrageous at a school, kid coming out and they're picking up parents. You know, those are the kind of things that should be out of bounds. You want to protect our country, protect our borders, make sure everyone is safe, but also live up to our values. And when you go do what happened in Minnesota, that's completely unacceptable and not who we are. And I think there's a difference between the two. And if we come up with an agreement, and by the way, again, there's a lot of people who actually have an idea of what that could look like, and I've been working on this. I'm really hopeful we can move forward.
But yet, even though there are problem solvers in your group like Congressman Suozzi and Congressman Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, who's a Republican, even though there's been these bipartisan rules,
talks,
nobody has agreed to it yet.
No, but I will tell you that, and this was publicly reported, that many of us have been working together for months, even in the Senate, Republicans. You saw Senator Katie Britt has been working on stuff. Mark Wayne Mullen, before he was Secretary of Homeland Security, I was talking to him. It's been reported we were working together when he was a senator on some reforms and agreements. So I actually am hopeful that we can get there. And I also believe, I really believe that there's going to be changes already being made with Tom Homeland at Homeland. And I'm hopeful that they're already shifting their behaviors away from where they were under Secretary Noem, which to me was totally unacceptable. And I believe there's going to be reforms. They should be codified. That's what I'm working on with others and others you mentioned. And I really believe we can get there. People want that. Right? They want us to make sure we protect our borders and keep away people who shouldn't be here and seek to do people harm, and also live up to our values and actually not roam the streets, busting into people's homes and without warrants and just going after people randomly. People don't want that. That's not who we are.
Well, let's talk about the war in Iran. Do people want that, and do you support that?
I think the government of Iran deserves to be crushed, in my opinion. They're an enemy of our country, the leading state sponsor of terror in the world. They've killed scores of Americans, attacked and killed our service members and our bases and our allies. Their banner is death to America. They've developed longer range missiles, as reported, things that I believe I want to protect our country and against terror.
So you support the war?
So I support going after them. I have been what I've said publicly is you actually have to have clear goals. And part of my concern has been is this administration hasn't laid out their objectives of what a win would look like. There's a big difference between weakening their missile program, which I think is critical, and weakening their nuclear program, which is essential so they can't threaten our country and our terror. You get into regime change, which I would love to see, but understand once you start going down that path, right, you got to understand who's going to be next, and that's a longer period of time. And we're already seeing gas up significantly, but the Straits of Hormuz closed, right, which is 20% of the world's oil running through there.
Because they're trying to stop the whole thing. I mean, the reason why they closed it, they're trying to stop the war. And here's the question.
The Iranians, of course.
The Iranians. But here's the issue. So now we have taken out lots of upper echelon leaders. And according, if you listen to the president, some second-tier leaders. So, but still, the people haven't risen up to try to take control of their government. So is regime change, even in the realm of reality, given what's happening there, that's been going on in that country?
I think regime change is very tough, right? Not impossible, but very tough.
And you're still going to have to deal with the same hardliners that you've had to deal with all along. So what changes?
But you massively, hopefully, we massively set back their programs, right? Their terror program, their ballistic missile program, which, by the way,
But you don't set back their desire to kill Jews.
Of course not. No, of course not. To kill Americans.
And to kill Israel.
Yes. And, by the way, to kill lots of our allies, kill Jews, but lots of our allies, us, right? They're terror proxies through Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. These are people who killed Americans.
But all those proxies are trying to kill Israel.
Yeah, of course. They have been for a long time.
So despite the fact that you've taken them out and you've taken out their missiles, it hasn't changed their desire to go after the Israelis and anybody that's associated
not the leadership. But I really believe, and this was the point that you were just, I think, touching on, you've got a groundswell of people in the country. After the leadership there, the government just killed 40,000 or more of their own people, massacred them, right, for speaking out and looking for freedom in Iran, speaking up for freedom, right, speaking up for democracy and wanting that. And this is who these people are, the government there. They seek to undermine freedom and democracy and attack our country. So we got to protect our country from them. And whether we and I think to your point, if we set them back massively, that would be seen, in my opinion, as a win. Changing the regime would be an ultimate win, but I'm not sure, that's a much more involved process, and that could involve boots on the ground. I don't support boots on the ground.
Okay, and now we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. The state budget has been later every year that Kathy Hochul has been governor. And if you're counting, that's 5 years. But this year, the focus is on whether there will or won't be new taxes and how New York City will fill a budget gap. State Senator John Liu is in the thick of the negotiations because he chairs the City Education Committee, and the mayor wants to delay class size stringence so that instead of having to have them start in the fall with 80% being classes between 20 and 25, he wants to delay it. You're the head of the committee that has to deal with it. What are your thoughts?
Well, as you know, class size reduction has been a huge priority of not only me, but many of my colleagues in the state legislature. The governor signed a law in 2022 that requires New York City reduce its overcrowded class sizes down to state and national norms. And there was a 6-year phase-in. We are now we're about to be in year 5 of that phase-in, where by September of 2026,
that's this September.
Yeah, that's this coming September. The city's supposed to have 80% of class rooms in compliance with the limitations, 20 to 25 students, depending on the grade. And then by 2028, September 2028, it should be, I'm sorry, September 2027, it should be fully phased in.
But that costs an awful lot of money. And this mayor is saying, let's pull it back. How do you feel about it?
I feel fine with giving this new mayor an extra couple of years. We've talked about, instead of having an 80%, then 100%, having a steadier phase-in of 70, 80, 90, and 100% by September of 2029. I think it's reasonable because from the get-go, Mamdani has been saying that he supports reducing class sizes in New York City so that all kids can get a sound basic education. And he's doing so in a very difficult situation because the previous administration did so little to get to those targets. So I think it's a reasonable request so long as they have a very clear plan on how to achieve ultimately that 100% compliance.
But see, there's going to be people who are going to say the mayor speaks out of both sides of his mouth, because when he campaigned, he said that it was absolutely a non-negotiable that you keep the class size mandates. And even on the first day of school in September, he said, and I quote, "The question of compliance has often been a point of negotiation, and that shouldn't happen." So now all of a sudden, now that he sees the reality of budget deals, he says he has to make a change.
Well, I am elated that you are holding him to his word. I think every public servant, including the mayor, should be accountable. But in this is a situation where he did inherit a very difficult task, and so rather than having potentially a chaotic roll into the full compliance, I think it's reasonable to have a 70, 80, 90, 100% compliance so long as they are able to produce a very coherent plan on how to get to those goals.
But how much money does this really save New York City?
Well, it doesn't. The delay in the full implementation was never meant to be a source of budgetary relief.
But it is now being regarded as a source.
Well, that's what the administration has said. I've actually pushed back quite a bit, saying that this is not about budgetary relief. The legislature, both the Senate and the Assembly, have already proposed ways to provide New York City with the budgetary relief that they need. Delaying class size reduction is not a source, as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to be a source of fiscal relief, but it's a way to allow the city to more systematically get to the goals.
Yeah, but if it's not going to provide fiscal relief, why do it?
Because it's highly unrealistic that the city will get to the 80% this coming September and 100 the next year. But it is much more realistic and more, I think it's more orderly to get to a 70, 80, 90, 100%. Again, I wish the previous administration had gotten us to the goals much quicker, but unfortunately they kept calling this, they kept complaining about the law instead of doing something about it.
So you're saying they didn't build the schools and they didn't hire enough teachers?
That's exactly right. It's not rocket science. In order to alleviate the overcrowding in New York City public school classrooms, we need more teachers, we need more classrooms. And so Chancellor Samuels has actually done a really good job to begin to develop this classroom build-out plan. We're waiting for the final plan before we go ahead and change the law for the timetable. And also, as you know, the question of mayoral control will come up as well this year.
Before we get to mayoral control, I want to talk to you about the question of equity. Because if you take a look at the money that was given to schools to reduce their class size, it turns out that there are studies that show that schools in low-performing districts got a lot more money to reduce their class size, and that the more affluent schools, where there's a big rush, everybody wants to get into the classroom, they have bigger class sizes, and you're going to have to give more money to affluent schools. Does that create a problem for you and a mayor who feel that we want to be equal and progressive?
I don't think it creates a problem at all, because this has been a struggle for 30 years now. 10 years of litigation led to the Campaign for Fiscal Equity decision 20 years ago, where the judges ruled that New York City school kids were not getting sound basic education because there were too many kids in the classroom. They did not get enough attention from the teacher. And so now, 20 years later, many of the high needs districts, they've already had their class sizes reduced. But there are still
many.
That's
a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. But we need that for every school kid in the city of New York. The courts ruled, and the state constitution says that every kid deserves a sound basic education, which is precluded when the class sizes are still too large.
But here's the issue. You have to have classrooms, enough classrooms, and enough buildings in order to do that. And there have been reports that you need $1.7 billion to build more schools. But the current chancellor says, let's use existing buildings. So my question to you is this. If you try to use some existing buildings, which now charter schools want to use, is that going to push charter schools out?
It's not a one-size-fits-all. The chancellor and his team, they've done what I think is a great job of making an inventory district by district, and in some cases school by school. There are some schools that still have more space within the building where they can build more classrooms. There are other schools where there's no more space within the building, but outside on school grounds, there's more land, so there's the potential to build another wing or annex. And then, of course, there are overcrowded school districts where they just simply need to build more classrooms by building brand new school buildings. So there's different ways of approaching this, and I think this is up to the chancellor to come up with this solid plan.
So we only have about a minute left, but I'm curious, mayoral control of the schools, you think it's going to pass, and how many years?
Well, we're not at the stage where we have an alternate system ready to propose, but so I think the governor has proposed a 4-year extension to mayoral control.
Is that too long?
It's not going to happen. It's going to be, how about this? I think it's going to be 2 years plus or minus 1.
You're giving yourself a lot of leeway, but why not 4?
4 years, I think many of my colleagues in the legislatures think it's too long for an unproven administration. So we want to see that this administration can deliver results for our public schools, and that includes coming in compliance with class size law. It also requires that our schools deliver better results for our students.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we will be right back. Thank you for joining me. If you're a New Yorker, you probably have an ongoing battle with possession creep, things that seem to multiply like rabbits and crowd out your space. Now, I'm not a hoarder, well, exactly, but I admit that the I've got junk people would have a field day in my home. How do New Yorkers deal with their stuff? They're weighing in on your point. What do you do in New York City when you have too much stuff?
Try to get rid of most of it.
Get rid of them.
Throw it away.
I don't know if I have too much stuff. I've never had that issue.
I donate it. I donate. Housing works. I always have a donation bag going. So I'm always reorganizing my closets, and I'm always taking bags to Goodwill.
You keep it? You keep all your stuff? All your things?
82.5% of it.
I save it. I shove it under my bed.
What kind of stuff do you throw under your bed?
My winter coats, all of my winter stuff. There's not enough closet space in the city, of course. So all of my off-season wear.
I'm recently retired, and my hope was when I retire, I'm going to get rid of all my work clothes, and I haven't gotten started because to me that's saying goodbye to that life. And
you don't want to do that.
And I don't want to do that. And it's hard.
Hard, yeah, you want to keep
hard.
it.
Right, because it's also a part of my youth.
So what about a self-storage or a storage unit?
Too expensive.
Couldn't afford it. If I had $1 million, I probably would.
We have a storage unit in our building.
I hope not to have that much.
Why?
If
I have to store it, then I don't need it.
I already have a storage unit.
You have a storage unit?
Yes.
What do you put in it?
It's actually my mother's furniture.
Really?
Yes.
Because you don't want, it's got memories, right?
Yes, right. And she's been gone 20 years.
You kept it for 20 years?
Yes.
What would you need to store if you had a unit like that?
It's a lot of like ephemera things. Like my mother kept my clothes when I first came home from the hospital. What am I ever going to do with that?
Clothes. I have way too much clothes.
We all have too much clothes. Yeah. Me too.
Probably all my off-season stuff, or I would buy like a vacuum.
Buy a vacuum. I love
like
that.
a nice vacuum.
I have a confession. I also have my first doll.
Oh, that's amazing. I have my baby blanket and my christening blanket, and everything is all, and the arts and crafts that I did in high school.
I get it.
And that was in the 70s.
This is a good question you ask, because I do have a lot of stuff that I do need to get rid of and figure it out, but self-storage, looking into it, it's just too expensive.
How much have you spent? Like, can we do the math? How much you spent over the course of the last $20 storing stuff?
Yeah, how much have you spent?
More, about $40,000. Yeah, I mean, it's been 20 years. So, and each year it goes up. So it's about, yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
for memories.
I understand. But you know what? I get it.